Our team is so spread out across the country. I would have loved to huddle everyone in the room together. Didn't happen for this one, but we did host a variety of update calls, and we identified really specific individuals as success drivers. So we call them executive sponsors here, but we leverage those executive sponsors to make sure that, when one of your teammates is asking, hey, I really need content for this particular section of the site. You're the subject matter expert. Can you get it to me by this specific date? Sometimes you do need a little bit of management oversight to really drive that deadline and to clear the way, make room in that individual's work week, knowing that this is an enterprise launch. Everybody's in it together. So we're going to leverage, not only the direct collaboration across teams, but managers.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples, not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz, real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
Some of the best conversations I have had with my kids are during what I call filler time. Not the quality time you hear hyped up, just a side conversation over breakfast, or driving to an errand, or putting together IKEA furniture. Marketing can be the same. Instead of focusing all this attention on forcing a customer to take an action, give them value in other ways and naturally bring up your product. Like my next guest story about selling insurance by bringing owls and boxes to schools. It's not an aggressive sales pitch. It's the side conversation. Or as my next guest puts it, a key lesson for her was, don't underestimate the soft sell. Here to share the story behind that lesson, along with many more lesson-filled stories, is Kelly Coulter, the head of marketing at Private Advisor Group. Thanks for joining me, Kelly.
Hey, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
It's going to be fun. So let's take a quick look at Kelly's background so everyone knows who I'm talking to. She's had a long tenure in financial services, from Fortune 500s to startup firms. Kelly was a senior marketing specialist at Mutual of Omaha Bank, public relations and social media director at Cetera Financial Group, among other roles. And for the past 4 years, she's been at Private Advisor Group. Private Advisor Group has $35.2 billion in advisory assets under management, and Kelly leads a small but mighty team of 5 located all across the country. So Kelly, give us a sense. What is your day like as head of marketing?
Yeah. Well, I love my job. So first I'll start that it's very fun. And when I start my day, I typically start with a walk with the big dog. Before I'm working, I clear the head, get outside. We rescue Great Danes. So big guy needs a big walk in the morning. Then I work out. Coffee is a must. And then jump into my day, where take meetings from folks all across the country, sometimes all around the world. And I would say, like, during the week, though, we will kick off our week as a team with editorial, and we're planning editorial, for the next and the coming weeks. So the whole marketing team will huddle on Mondays. And then another important part of our day/week on Thursdays, we have sort of our start-stop meeting where we'll, what are your 2 highlights of things that you're working on that the team needs to know? Where are you stuck? Where are you stopped? Do you need any help? Those take place on Thursdays. And it's a great way when you have a team that's spread all across the country to keep everyone connected, tuned into what's happening, and really in the know with all things that are moving across the marketing department.
That's a nice bookend for the week. Let's start right. Let's end right. I like that. Well, let's take a look at some of the lessons that Kelly learned in her career. As I've said before, I've never really done another career. I've never been an actuary or podiatrist, whatever. But I feel like we get to make things as marketers, and that's what's so cool about our job. But also sometimes when we make things go awry, and that gets into Kelly's first lesson here. Learn from your mistakes and let it go. So, sounds painful. Tell us how you learned this lesson.
Oh my goodness. So this was a journey. And I will say the let it go part is the part that I struggle with the most. So over a decade ago, we had this big direct mail campaign for one of our biggest events of the whole year. And visit the website was the call to action. So this was before QR codes were really popular. So, you had the handwritten domain that people would then go type in. And we created, this beautiful mailer. It was like an accordion fold out. We did the copy, the creative. We worked with the mail house to pick even, the matte, beautiful texture of what this print mailer would be. And it wasn't until the job was getting released from the printer that I realized we'd mixed up the words on the domain name. So it was right in one instance on the mailer. It was misprinted in another instance. And I was just so stressed and frustrated. It had gone through so many rounds of editing, proofreading, somehow got missed by all of us. And I started, just frantically searching. What could we do? Can I purchase that domain and just redirect it? What an easy answer. Well, of course, it was owned by somebody else already. And Daniel, if you've ever done, the domain bidding, that is not a quick process just to transition that. So that wasn't a solution. So I'm sitting there racking my brain, chatting with my colleagues, like, what can we do? This is so frustrating and it's already being shipped out. And my CMO at the time, Michael Zuna, he messaged me the Frozen song, Let It Go. And, it really helped. I was so stressed. We had this big event. There was so much planning, so much great work happening. And it was just that, reminder, we're human. We make mistakes. And sometimes you need to just learn from them and let it go. And, what's kind of funny about that whole story is that not one person messaged us about the incorrect domain. So they either went to the correct one or they just figured it out and, didn't say anything. But it sticks with me. And that's one mistake that I have not made since, thankfully.
I mean, I started my career in print, and that was one thing I appreciate about digital. I remember publishing a brochure. We produced a brochure, expensive brochure for a luxury real estate property called Windsong. And we're all proud of it. My art director is just showing it to the receptionist up front. And she's like, what's a windong? And we're like, what? At the time, Quark Express, it's spell check, but when it's a proper term, it wouldn't, And so we had to, take out the guts and reprint it. And that was a nightmare.
It's just painful when that happens.
I'm thankful for digital where you go in and make a quick change. But I'm curious, how has that experience influenced how you lead a marketing team now? Because, for example, when I interviewed Shafqat Islam, the CMO of Optimizely, one of his lessons was kill snakes. And he talked about a story from Ross Perot who joked, if a big old school company like GM had a lot of snakes, a snake invasion, they'd hire consultants, they'd have their meetings, there would be quarter by quarter plans versus just killing the snakes. And he talked about how moving quickly in a fast-paced competitive market is so important. So the mindset he sets for his team is better done than perfect. So that's a painful lesson you learned. We certainly don't want to send out the wrong URL, of course, but we can overcorrect sometimes as well, right? And stymie speed and innovation. So I wonder, how have you figured out to balance those things, and how has that experience influenced how you lead a marketing team now?
Yes. And that's great advice or a lesson that he shared because, you really do want to focus on progress over perfection. And so that is something that we remind ourselves as a team. Like if it's mostly there, you can keep editing and, overdo it to a certain degree. So we absolutely have those reminders of, progress over perfection. Let's keep moving this forward. And also when there are mistakes, because we are all human, sometimes you do have to kind of, okay, what's the lesson learned here? And how are we going to let it go? Like, let's truly move on, refocus and recenter. I remember one of my direct reports, this is at a different event, but this was a funny thing. We miscounted name badges. So had a whole event. Everyone's coming in later that day and we didn't have enough name badges. And she comes and mentions it. And I said, well, let's call Best Buy, Staples. Someone's going to have name badges. We're making a trip. And she kind of had big eyes and looked at me. We went and we found name badges. We were fine by the time everyone got there. And, she pulled me aside later and just said, thank you so much for how you handled that. And I said, well, what did you expect? And she said, I thought you were going to yell. And I was a new relationship to her at the time. And I just said, oh, I don't think yelling really solves things, figure out what the solution is, learn from the mistake and let it go.
Yeah, totally. And later you can worry about, okay, what process are we going to change? But in the moment, help people not be stressed and anxious because we're not going to make good decisions when we're like that.
Right.
Yeah. And one key way we can avoid that and be successful in other things is by preparing, right? And that's a key lesson you mentioned. Preparation is the key to success. So how'd you learn this lesson?
This was kind of a fun one. So after joining Private Advisor Group where I'm at today, our then CEO, RJ Moore, announced he was going to transition to board chair and appoint Frank Smith as the new CEO. That's our current CEO. So executive transitions carry risk. Anyone working in marketing, comms, or at, executive level, you've had to navigate that. And I've seen similar announcements at other firms where that can result in up to 10% attrition. Sometimes you're really, you have clients or even employees that are really connected to that individual. So knowing this and to ensure a really smooth handoff, we partnered really closely. So Frank, RJ, and I spent several months where we developed a really comprehensive internal and external comm strategy to support this transition. So this plan included, detailed minute by minute rollouts from the formal press release to the public, messaging guidance, frequently asked questions with anticipated answers. We had other key spokespeople ready to go to support the messaging, targeted email. We had one-to-ones, live webinars. It was a full plan, minute by minute, that, for the day of, but then also post-transition, what does that look like? We really tried to, anticipate every potential question and concern and really looked at strategy. So, if we started to go off plan, wait, what is our strategy? Let's go back to it. This is the timing. This is what we agreed to. This is what makes sense. And with that, the transition ended up being really seamless. We had no known attrition, which is rare. And it ended up, all that preparation drove success and a result that still proud of to this day.
No, congratulations. So when I hear you talking, that seems like I can see that employee focus of keeping employees. I think when you're talking about nutrition, I wonder if there's any specific things you did with other stakeholders. Because, for example, I'm pretty sure the way your company is set up, right, is there's others betting your business on your platform, financial advisors, what have you. But other companies have versions of that. Some have franchisees, investors. And boy, if you're a public company, you got press, analysts, and all of these things. So sure, the employees are important, but these other stakeholders, boy, we got to get them on board too. So there seemed like to be an employee focus there, which is awesome. And maybe you were talking about more. I just wonder, how did you break down the stakeholders that you also had to keep on board? If there's anything specific you did for different stakeholders?
Yeah, that's a great question. Absolutely. So first, you really have to be honest with yourself, as a privately held firm. Who are your true stakeholders? Who needs to know the information and when? Do some people need to be clued in a little bit early? Are some, immediately after the announcement goes live? So we had that detailed. And I will say there were a handful of stakeholders that were informed ahead of the Wired press release. And when we're looking at something like that, it's really, really limited audience. We time it so they hear after press hours, if you will, to, prevent and contain any possibility of a leak. So we had that pretty limited. I think at the time we looked at, maybe our advisor council. So, that audience, as well as, a few limited investors that needed to be aware. But then in addition to that, after the release was live, there were other stakeholders on the list as well that maybe weren't as highly impacted and need to know as super timely. They also got calls that day because you never want your stakeholders reading something in the news and leaving that to interpretation. When you call and you let your important stakeholders know this announcement was made, here's what you can expect, here's what we're doing. It's such a better feeling than, oh my gosh, look what just happened to such and such firm. So that was part of our plan. It remains part of all of our comms plans. Where do the stakeholders fit in? When are they being communicated with? And who's leading that? And not only that, but what form of communication? Will an email suffice? Maybe, maybe not. And if not, who's leading the direct outreach? So we literally had all of that assigned and detailed in our huge strategy that we executed.
Yeah, I mean, that's such a smart strategy because sometimes it's not just what people hear, but it's how they hear it. And if they feel like they have a closer intimacy to the firm and they find out in the public press, again, it's not, maybe you're not just losing that one person, but these days everyone's a publisher. And if they take to LinkedIn or social media or whatever with their ideas, you're going to lose them versus, oh, hey, I knew about this ahead of time, whatever the news is, they're inside and should, they'd have a different reaction just because of that. But it brings up your next lesson so we can collaborate on lots of different levels. The whole second half of How I Made It Marketing is about collaboration. So I love this. But we collaborate, of course, most tightly with our internal teams. And you said collaboration is powerful. I feel like a lot of us have felt this. How did you specifically learn this lesson?
Oh my gosh, this is fun. And it's a lesson that's, known, but this is really where you just felt the power truly come to life. So one of my favorites was our team here launched a platform called Greenhouse. So it's an advisor intranet, and it really houses all of Private Advisor Group's tools and resources in one platform. The platform also offers single sign-on technology, which, believe it or not, sometimes financial services has a reputation for being a little bit slow to adopt single sign-on. We have it for a lot of key partners that our advisors use every single day. It offers a digital community discussion group, which, again, that's another thing that in a highly regulated environment, that is a competitive advantage for us to offer. And it replaced an outdated system. So building and launching Greenhouse really required cross-functional collaboration with tech partners, with global developers, ops, compliance, engagement teams. It touched every employee at Private Advisor Group. And so with so many moving parts all throughout the organization, success really hinged on trust, clear communication, shared ownership, and again, having a really detailed strategy in place to follow and guide us through the launch of that was really what drove success. But, when you're tapping into the expertise and you're aligning teams around a common vision, we built a platform that was far stronger, more useful than any one person could have done alone. And that was kind of where that power of collaboration was just so cool, so fun to see come to life. And I'm proud to say, Daniel, that platform is now award-winning. We were named by Investment News as one of the most innovative tech platforms. So that was a recent award for Greenhouse, and really, really proud that, our community put in the effort, the maintenance, all of that to bring that to life. And now it's award-winning.
Well, congratulations. Can you take us into the room where it happened? Any specific examples of things you did to foster that collaboration? Because, for example, when I interviewed Tiffin Dano-Kwan, the CMO of Amplitude, one of her lessons was bridge marketing and product for collaborative growth. And she told the story of physically moving into the product team's office to foster collaboration when the goal was to launch 12 product innovations in 2 months. So for you, Kelly, any specific examples come to mind of how you fostered that collaboration?
Yeah, that is a cool example. Our team is so spread out across the country. I would have loved to huddle everyone in the room together. Didn't happen for this one, but we did host a variety of update calls, and we identified really specific individuals as success drivers. So we call them executive sponsors here, but we leverage those executive sponsors to make sure that, when one of your teammates is asking, hey, I really need content for this particular section of the site. You're the subject matter expert. Can you get it to me by this specific date? Sometimes you do need a little bit of management oversight to really drive that deadline and to clear the way, make room in that individual's work week, knowing that this is an enterprise launch. Everybody's in it together. So we're going to leverage, not only the direct collaboration across teams, but managers, hey, we really need you to be aware that this is happening and make sure that you're creating capacity for your team members to contribute. So we had a lot of success by doing that and naming executive leads to kind of help leverage project deadlines, reiterate, sticking to plan, and really making sure that team members, even if their manager wasn't directly involved in the process, that those team members had capacity to truly contribute to the success of the platform.
Yeah, well, collaboration is so key in marketing. We've made it the whole second half of the episode of How I Made It in Marketing. And so in just a moment, Kelly is going to name names and talk about some of the key people that really helped her in her career that she collaborated with. And honestly, if you're listening, we don't do that enough in our careers. Go on LinkedIn, thank someone right now who helped her in your career. But before we get there, I should mention that the How I Made It in Marketing podcast is brought to you by MechLabs AI, the parent company of Marketing Sherpa. Marketing Sherpa has teamed up with MechLabs AI to produce a research study. We are granting AI engineering vouchers to eligible companies. You can learn more at mechlabs.com/5K voucher. That's neclabs.com/5, the letter K and the word voucher. Okay. Kelly, let's talk about some of these people in your career that you really collaborate with that really had an impact on you and you learned a lot from them. The first lesson you mentioned was invest in your mental health. And you said you learned it from Pundit Dasa of Mindful Work Corporation, a former monk, mindfulness expert, author, and international keynote speaker. So how did you learn this from Pundit?
Yeah, Pundit is just an amazing, incredible human. And we recently had the opportunity to collaborate with him at Private Advisor Group's annual conference. We brought him in as a keynote speaker because his message really hones in on the importance of prioritizing your mental health, both personally and professionally. And he uses really powerful storytelling with data to break down some of the lingering stigmas that we have around mental health, particularly in corporate environments. And you hear, take care of your health, invest in your mental health. But Pundit was able to give us some tools to actually do that. And one of the ideas that just resonated with me most was his analogy of closing the apps in your brain. And you think of that, you do that on your phone and your phone operates more efficiently. Do we do that enough for ourselves and our own mental well-being? So it was a really effective reminder to reset and recharge amid, the constant demands we all face on the day-to-day. And for me, it's one that I really took to heart and I actually apply. It was really simple. He actually took us through a breathing exercise. And I think the exercise lasted 10 minutes. Daniel, it felt like 2. It was just wonderful to kind of pause, close your eyes, take some deep breaths, and clear out everything that's going on in your head. In fact, I did it ahead of this podcast today just to make sure that I was, closing out from prior meetings, resetting, and ready to be fully engaged and present here with you. So Pundit's message is just one that will always stick with me. And I try to remind myself to take a moment, close those apps, and really it's okay to invest in your mental health throughout the workday.
No, I love that. And I got to tell the audience, this was something Kelly told me when we started talking. So a little behind the scenes inside baseball here. I asked for like a 90-minute time block when we're recording these, partly because I wanted that first 15 to 30 minutes. Marketers are busy. Sometimes they're stepping out of budget meetings or board meetings, and you can't just step into the next thing and hit record and go through your career in this in-depth way and help an audience. And so when I was telling Kelly about that, she's like, I've been there. I was already doing that. I already know the right thing to do to prepare. So kudos to you. Because when you think of mental health, it's like this personal wellness thing for sure. But it's also performance. It's like, if we got that right, we're going to perform. So kudos to you for doing that. And it gets me thinking, so now, you're a senior leader in your company, in your department. Is there anything specific you do now or you have done with your career, your team, your customers to help them invest in their mental health? Because, for example, when I interviewed Connor Swagel, the CMO and co-founder of Party Bicycle, one of his lessons was you are not alone. And he told the story of creating custom You Are Not Alone bicycles in partnership with the You Are Not Alone mural project to help destigmatize this conversation around mental health. Right? It was really key for their branding, who they were. So for you, Kelly, is there anything specific you're doing now or you've done in your career for your team, your customers to help them invest in their mental health?
Absolutely. I love this question. I think there's a lot of little things that we do that add up to big change. So one of them is calendar blocking. You touched on it. Just if you have a big meeting, whether that's with a client, with your team, you're presenting, give yourself a little bit of time. Block, if you can, an hour. If you can't, even if it's 15 minutes ahead of, that big meeting, that big event, and slow down. Let your brain refocus, transition into what you're going to, focus on next, and even practice or breathe or do something to really be invested in, that content, if you will. The other thing that we do here is, we're not super set on, I need you, behind a screen from 8 to 5. I don't believe in that. I think that, you need to get up, you need to stretch, you need to take walks. And we're very good about reminding ourselves of that as a whole at Private Advisor Group. One of our brand values is to enjoy the journey. And so sometimes if you are finding that it's getting too intense and you're back to back on Zooms and you have a lot of deadlines, we will stop and say, hey, take a break, that was an intense meeting. Let's take a walk. And that's common in our culture here, just to remind each other, let's enjoy the journey. It You can't just work at an aggressive pace all the time. You do need to step away, let a message resonate, and you often do come back as a better you and as a better teammate to your colleagues once you do that.
The thing I really like about that is you have a work from home culture. And something I've noticed transitioning from in office to work from home is I feel more pressure to respond to Slacks like right away. When you're in an office and people can see us a little different, they see you're busy or this or that. Like, okay, the Slack comes, I got to respond right away. So I love that you set that culture up of like, look, you don't need to be like shackled to your laptop because it can definitely feel that way sometimes.
It's unhealthy in my opinion. Like I'm all about quality over quantity. Give me a comprehensive, detailed response that, moves the mark versus just quick hits sometimes can be misinterpreted or just not as effective.
100%. So this next one is my favorite lesson. Anytime I go through a podcast guest application, and there's a lot of good lessons in here, but there's always one that just kind of jumps out at me and resonates the most. I think as marketers, kind of goes along with mental health too. When we have a goal, we just want to push, right? So we want to push the customer hard, go do this, whatever the CTA is, right? But you said, don't underestimate the soft sell. And you learned that from all people, not from a CMO or CEO or anything, from Jim Fowler, who's a professional zoologist. So how did you learn this lesson from a zoologist?
This was such a cool experience. So early in my career, I was probably, late 20s, early 30s. I had the chance to work with Jim Fowler. He was one of the original co-hosts of Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. So back in the day, that was a documentary show that they produced featuring wildlife, and Jim and his co-host kind of, navigating that journey, helping animals. So Jim came in for a media tour here in Phoenix, and we did a variety of live news segments. We had special events in schools. We visited boys and girls clubs just to give them a little bit of high value wildlife education. Jim is a fascinating storyteller. So he talked a little bit about his experience on the show. And there was a very subtle message about the importance of financial literacy. He, had this great way he would help the message land by joking that he was thankful for Mutual of Omaha insurance when he was, wrestling an alligator or a lion or something like that. It always earned chuckles from the audience, but it was just this subtle reminder that, good product placement, good plug for Mutual of Omaha, but we were also in the room should they want to carry on and talk about their financial services. The audience knew where to find that. They knew it was important, but it was just, a memorable, relatable, and effective way to help that message resonate. And as a result of those tours, we would see a really lovely steady stream of referrals come through post-tour. And it reinforces, a soft sell wrapped in an authentic and fun experience, an engaging experience. That's so much more powerful than a hard push. I think, people tune out pretty quickly when you feel like you're being pitched at. It's not a good feeling, and it's easy to tune that out. So just the importance of the soft sell is really something that I think as marketers, we really need to consider in how we structure our approach and as sales leaders as well. And Jim Fowler was just a wonderful experience to really help that message resonate. Don't underestimate the soft sell.
Yeah, I love that. And also what I hear you saying is like, give value before you're asking for anything too, right? I mean, you're about giving value.
Absolutely.
Sponsorship. So I wonder when that, makes perfect sense in kind of that B2C setting and there's a trust building element, but I wonder how you now do that in B2B and especially in the kind of financial industry, because, there's this at least perception of the financial industry that is very numbers driven, right? We talk about the quants every day. I see in the Wall Street Journal, is this number S&P's up, Dow's down and all this stuff. And so it would seem like in that industry it might be even harder because, hey, I just want to see the raw numbers. I'm going to pick based purely on logic, right? And nothing else. And like, what are going to be the best performers here and there? So I wonder how you bring kind of this soft sell idea into that B2B financial world.
Absolutely. Well, I mentioned Jim Fowler was a fabulous storyteller, and that is a tactic we use in B2B. Tell the story. So, instead of just saying this financial advisor is well in tune to the markets, talk about what is their personal brand and story? And we encourage them. What's your nonprofit footprint? What are you doing in the community to show up so you're not this, stuffy financial advisor, if you will? And we have an amazing advisor community that really invests in their giving footprint all across the country. So that's been exciting to see how they've leveraged that as sort of a soft sale. Because when you're out volunteering, you're out in the Chamber of Commerce doing different civic activities, people will naturally ask, "Oh, hey, Daniel, what do you do for a living? Tell me more about that." And you make some of those natural connections without feeling like it's all about numbers. Another interesting one too, that just, kind of storytelling. We challenge advisors, don't just post about finance. Don't just talk about finance. Tell about who you are. We had one advisor in particular, I always remember this. We had a chat with her, and she said that she started posting about two things, her dog and her son, a couple times a year. And she actually had someone reach out that was a huge referral for her. And she said, "I loved your post about your dog. I'm an avid, rescuer. And that message just resonated with me. You always intimidated me. And that was really beautiful to see that story. And I wanted to get to know you better." And so using storytelling a lot, it has to match with your brand and your identity and be authentic. But sometimes that's a great way to achieve that soft sell, if you will, and be an entry point to your audience.
Yeah, I mean, I got to say, I was looking for some financial professional help not too long ago, and reaching out to different firms and stuff, and seeing what I ultimately made the decision on, because we as marketers, I always encourage it. Like, as a customer, kind of notice how you're making decisions, because your customers are going to do the same things. Because the way we think at work as marketers sometimes, and then we think totally separately as customers, we just naturally fall into that customer habits and way of thinking. So I was looking for a financial firm, and I was reaching out to some and all that stuff. And then the one I ultimately went with, I just felt some were just more human in communications. And it was actually kind of more the human being I was dealing with. And it's funny because going in, that was not my goal. It was, like I said, more of numerical and sensible things. But then actually you forget kind of like, oh, I actually have to work with this person. And I want someone who seems kind of human that I want to work with.
And share your financial life and be
Yeah.
comfortable with that. Their job is so important. And I love that you said that you want someone you have that trust with, you feel comfortable asking, "Hey, I think this is the right direction. What are your thoughts on this?" And you really do need that human element behind, the financial services aspect and behind all of the research and planning and all of that. There has to be a human element. When you're dealing with people's finances, there are so many important steps on that journey, both good and bad. Maybe you have a fantastic promotion. Maybe you have an inheritance coming, but you're really sad about, that person that passed away. That financial advisor needs to support that and figure that, like, how are they going to make that personal to you, Daniel, and break through and help you navigate that journey in a meaningful way. And that's where having sometimes, shared stories and shared backgrounds and just being open and transparent in some of what you're navigating can really help the investor sitting in front of you open up and, be willing to accept the advice for what they're about to face.
Absolutely. No matter what we know in whatever B2B industry, we're still humans helping humans. It's not business to business. It's people working in businesses to people working in businesses. Or in the case of, this, when it's professional services for consumers, it's still people who have an expertise in a business with people who need help there. Which is why I like your last lesson, because some of your lessons here, this one transcends marketing and even business. It's just a very human lesson, as some of your others have been. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I think that's probably a universal truth, not just for marketing. You said you personally learned this from Barclay Payne at the nonprofit Invest in Others. How did you learn this from Barclay?
Yeah, so this was less of a fresh lesson, more validation, if you will. But Barclay is the CEO of Invest in Others. It's a nonprofit firm that I volunteer for. Private Advisor Group also sponsors it. One of our co-founders sits on the board, John Hyland. So we have a lot of involvement with this wonderful nonprofit. And my role, essentially, I help advisors when they're applying for grants or donations from Invest in Others. I'll help on that side. And then I help the firm on their marketing committee as well. And through that, I've just been so incredibly impressed with the team and Barclay at Invest in Others. They are so strategic, resourceful. They find creative ways to maximize every penny of their budget. And one of the things I've just admired the most is their willingness to ask for help. They will tap in and leverage their network. So whether they need assistance on public relations, research, tapping into industry influencers, please share this to further their mission. They will ask, and it's in a beautiful, respectful way. And they've just shown time and time again that asking for help, it really doesn't diminish your work. It invites other people's to step up and amplify your message. And more often than not, people do. So, don't be afraid if you're thinking, gosh, I could really use help from so-and-so on this project, or I'd love to leverage this person's expertise. I say, reach out. It's not going to hurt if you get a no. And if you get a yes, you're going to get a little extra help and a little extra brain and mind share into what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great lesson for all of us in our careers and in our roles. But as leaders also, I think kind of sometimes of like going the next level. And I wonder if you have any examples of how you proactively help your team or customer before they even have to ask for help. So for example, when I wrote an article about mentoring, my favorite lesson was from Christine Marvin, the CMO of Marvin Windows and Doors. And she learned from her mentor, it's our role as leaders to matchmake. And, I think that's a key element. It's matchmaking with the right mentors, but it's also, getting your team in the right roles. It's getting your customers or vendors or partners the right resources. I mean, there's a whole slew of things we have to do there. And that kind of, obviously we want to help them when they ask for help. We want to ask for help, but kind of proactively getting them the right information or the right mentoring or the right matching before they even ask for help. I mean, that may be the highest level. So I just wonder from your career, if you have any examples of that, of kind of thinking maybe 2 steps ahead of whoever you're leading or serving, and how you proactively made sure they had what they needed.
That's a great question. And I'll give you, kind of one example, especially if you're working with young professionals that are entering, your industry. Opening doors and making introductions can be so incredibly impactful, but also being open to them doing the same. So let's say that you're launching an RFP and, this was a true example. We were looking at web providers when we went through a brand and website refresh about a year ago. So we actually asked the entire team, hey, we're going to go through a website RFP. These are some firms that we would consider. Do you have anyone else? And I put forth the agency. I'd worked with them in previous lives, but teed up that intro, but also stepped back. Like, here's one to consider, but I'm going to let you take it from here. And the team was able to open relationships with other agencies and vet them through the process and then land on the decision where they felt most comfortable. So giving them a little bit of guidance, opening the door, making introductions to the degree that you can, but then also being willing to accept and meet some of the introductions or parties that they might be interested in, I think is so incredibly meaningful in showing respect to your young and rising stars, but then also getting them ingrained with some of the connections that have helped you in the industry. It's so, so important.
That's what I've heard from a lot of leaders, that biggest challenge and in getting leadership right is stepping back and enabling your team as opposed to kind of doing it for them or guiding too much. So I think that's a great lesson. Well, Kelly, we've talked about many lessons about what it means to be a marketer, what it means to be a human and a business leader and all that stuff as well, but really also what it means to do this thing we call marketing. If you had to just break it down for us, in your opinion, what are the key qualities of an effective marketer?
Yeah, I mean, there's some of the standard things you'd expect. You want someone that's creative. We talked about collaboration. I truly believe as marketers, you really have to collaborate with sales individuals, with tech, with your whole organization. So, some of that might seem pretty standard, but then you have to be able to use data to make meaningful marketing decisions. So that's probably one that I will always look for, always hire, always ask about in any interview or opportunity to vet. How are you using data to drive marketing decisions? So that's the one that I would leave you with. That's probably one of the most important in today's environment.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for sharing all the lessons from your career, some of the key decisions you made. I learned a lot today.
Well, Daniel, it's been so much fun talking to you. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketingsherpa.com.